Well, good day, everyone. I'm Patrick Mcgowan. I'm an Associate Director of the Institute of Aging and Lifelong Health and Director of Self-Management, and it's a pleasure being here today at this event. Before we start, I'd like to do a Territorial Acknowledgement. So I acknowledge and respect the Lingwingan peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land and water continue to this day. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Kate Lorick. Kate's the former director of the Stanford Patient Education Research Center, and she's currently Professor Emerita at Stanford University School of Medicine, Division of Rheumatology and Immunology. She's also a partner in the Self-Management Resource Center. Dr. Lorick holds a master's degree in nursing and a doctorate degree in public health in health education. So Kate is a pioneer in the field of chronic disease self-management. Using a public health approach, she developed and evaluated community-based education program for individuals with a wide range of chronic health conditions, including arthritis, diabetes, lung disease, cancer, and even pain. And these self-management programs have been adopted by several organizations across Canada, in communities across Canada, the US, Great Britain, Australia, China, Europe, and South Africa. Her work developing and disseminating the chronic disease self-management program, one of those programs, is very remarkable. This 6-week program builds participants' confidence in ability to manage their health and maintain active and fulfilling lives. And the research has found that in addition to improvements in patient-reported health outcomes, the program also reduces hospital admissions, length of stay, outpatient visit frequency, and general healthcare utilization and spending. So this is a perfect relationship between research and dissemination of programs. As a research, Kate's considered a powerhouse, nearly 160 published journal articles. She has 16 books and monographs and 18 book chapters. And I was asking Kate before, how many times has her work been cited? And she said about 33,000 times. So that's quite... And then as an intervention disseminator, the self-management programs are available in 35 countries now, 50 states, most Canadian provinces, and through the Pan-American Health Organization initiative. And each year between 50,000 and 75,000 people take these programs. So you think year after year after year really gets there. And today Kate will be talking about staying happy, healthy, and active between visits of doctors. And this is going both virtual and live. So thank you very much for coming live, and it's really nice to see you. We have approximately 500 people watching us virtually, and we were just listening at where they're coming from. Auckland, New Zealand, Transylvania, all over the United States, across Canada, and British Columbia, Victoria, all the way up and down the island. So away you go. So with much ado, just before we do this, Kate, so I have a chance, this is Lee. Most of you know Lee Ostig. She's our self-management coordinator for Vancouver Island. So if you have any question about a program or want to get involved somehow, just come and see Lee afterwards, okay? So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Kate. And my second colleague is Barbara Wiggins. Barbara is a brilliant person. That's a brilliant person. Has experience in self-management. And any time when I would be teaching at the university, when I needed somebody to really explain what self-management, Barbara came and did it, and she could do it better than anybody else. So I'm going to turn over to Barbara, and Barbara, you're going to give us an introduction to.
Thank you. So here we are in 2022. We're still dealing with aftershocks of COVID, shortages of doctors and other healthcare professionals, and we're also dealing with fierce competition on all sides for those scarce healthcare dollars. So how can we, in the face of this kind of a scene, maintain our best possible health so that we can continue to do that which brings us joy? And happily, today we have with us Dr. Kate Lorick to address that very essence of self-management, staying happy, healthy, and active in between visits to the doctor. I'm not going to go over to Dr. Lorig's qualifications because you did that so eminently. But with all of the self-management programs available, they are available for people who are dealing with issues of chronic diseases, HIV, cancer, diabetes, chronic pain, and others. In BC, we do offer these programs through the UVics Institute of Aging and Lifelong Health. And as we contend with, or even belong to, an aging population, and we're prone to these chronic conditions and long-term conditions, it's more important than ever to be knowledgeable about this very powerful approach to optimizing our own health. And now it's my pleasure to turn to our expert. Please welcome Dr. Kate Lorick.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I am so thrilled, number one, to see real people and not a Zoom screen. This is the first time I've been able to do this in about 2.5 years, so I cannot tell you how excited it is. And I'd also like to thank the University of Victoria, the Institute for Lifelong Learning and Health, and to Patrick Mcgowan, and to all of you for coming out today. This is an interesting presentation because I don't have a single PowerPoint slide. And at this point, I do not know what I'm going to talk about. And the reason is you're going to tell me. Because I know a whole lot about living with chronic illnesses. I live with my share of them, as I know many of you do. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, is I'm going to ask those of you that are virtual to write one word of what you would like me to talk about. I can talk about pain. I can talk about arthritis. I can talk about sleep. I can talk about stress. I can talk about cancer. I can talk about sex. I can talk about taking medications. I can talk about talking with your physician. I can talk about a whole lot of stuff. So I want you all virtually to just write one word. For those of you here in the auditorium, I would like you to tell me what you would like me to talk about. We will very quickly have a list. We're going to do a very quick vote. And the things with the top votes, if I know anything about them, we'll talk about. How's that? All right, so for those of you in the auditorium, what would you like me to talk about? Pain. Just a minute here. Pain, what else? I'm sorry. Mood, sorry. Okay. Pain, mood, what else? Wait a minute. Diabetes. Okay, what else? Lack of energy. Okay, what else? Sciatica nerve pain, okay.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
RA, okay. What? Yeah, I got rheumatoid arthritis. I just wrote down RA. Remember, I work for the Department of Rheumatology. I shortcut this stuff. Yeah.
Systemic inflammation in your brain.
Systemic, oh dear. Systemic inflammation and your brain. That's more than one word. Okay. Yes? Back in the back. Sleep. Okay. Anything else? Osteoarthritis. I'm going to just put arthritis. How's that? And we can talk about different kinds. I won't talk about all 100 types. Ageism. Sexism. Okay, what else? Yes? Osteoporosis. Okay. Anything else? Yes? The significance of
The person who lives with the person who has a chronic illness.
okay, how to live with somebody with chronic illness. Okay, being a care partner with somebody with chronic illness. Okay. Okay. You know, I'm not going to put addiction on the list. I do know some things about addiction, but I don't know enough to really talk well to you about it, okay? I'm sorry. I'm actually working on an addiction study right now, but the addiction part is not my expertise. Yes? Cancer. Okay. All right. Now, Lee, tell me the things on your list that the people out there have told us. And what I'm going to do is this, just to shorten the time. I'm going to go through this list, and each of you get to have no more than 3 votes. So I'm going to read the list once. Each of you get to have 3 votes. And is there anything on this list that you got that I didn't get that with lots of them?
Yeah, there was 3 that really
Okay.
stood out.
What were they?
Grief,
Grief. Okay.
joy,
Joy.
and sex.
And sex. Okay, we'll add grief, joy, and sex to the list from our folks out there. So I'm going to read you the whole list once, and then all of you here are going to get to vote. I'm afraid that those of you that are in virtual land are not going to get to vote. I'm sorry. But I've noted the things that you're interested in. So here's the list, folks. Think about it. You'll have 3 votes. Pain, mood, diabetes, lack of energy, sciatica, arthritis, a systemic inflammation in your brain, sleep, ageism, sexism, osteoporosis, living with someone with chronic disease, cancer, grief, joy, and sex. So let's go through, and 3 votes, no more. Pain. That's kind of medium. Mood. Okay. Diabetes. Few. Lack of energy. That's a lot, okay? Arthritis. Medium. Systemic infection in your brain. Okay. Sleep. Okay. Ageism. Sexism. Osteoporosis. Okay. Living with someone with chronic illness. Interesting. Cancer. Grief. Okay. Joy. Sex. Okay. So I think we got the list, and what I see from this list is that the thing with the most votes, and as I said, this was just looking at you quickly, was lack of energy. So we're going to talk about fatigue and lack of energy, which actually ends up pointing to a lot of these other things. Probably talk about grief since it came up so heavily online, even though it wasn't so heavily here. And to some extent, joy is the other side of that. Mm-hmm. And then the other topic that people talked a lot about was mood. And then we'll kind of see how these other things fall in, because I think we'll probably at least be able to touch on a lot of these different things. How's that? Mm-hmm. So let's start out by talking a little bit about lack of energy. And lack of energy, I'm not surprised that that came out as number 1. And the reason that I'm not surprised is that is the most common symptom. It is the most common complaint across chronic conditions. It doesn't matter whether you have arthritis or cancer or diabetes. That's the most common complaint. And a lot of people think that this, I'm going to talk about lack of energy, But I'm also going to talk about fatigue, because that's kind of similar things. They're slightly different, but I'll probably use both words and just consider that I'm using them as though they were the same. Lack of energy, fatigue, can actually be caused by the disease. And there's degrees of lack of energy or fatigue. I actually never knew that until I myself had cancer. I always thought I had fatigue. When I had cancer and I was in treatment, I had some hanging baskets of flowers outside of my house. It would have taken me 30 seconds to take down those baskets of flowers so they didn't freeze in the winter. And I never got them down, and they froze because of fatigue. That's the fatigue in cancer is kind of the extreme end of lack of energy. So diseases themselves can cause lack of energy. And somebody asked about systemic inflammation in the brain. Well, inflammation of any sort, inflammation takes a lot of energy in your body, and if you have an active infection going on, everything else is going to slow down so that that energy can be used for the infection and for fighting the infection. So there definitely is a connection between active infection. It's not surprising that one of the major symptoms of COVID and post-COVID is fatigue. And it's because the body is really busy fighting a virus, and even after the disease, the energy stores have been depleted and they have to be built back up again. So yes, disease can cause fatigue, and I want to be very clear that I believe that. However, fatigue can be caused by other things that are related to chronic illness. So what are some of the things that can cause fatigue? Poor nutrition. Strangely enough, poor nutrition causes fatigue, especially diets that are very high in carbohydrates and very high in sugars. And why is that? Because what happens is you raise your blood sugar really high, and then it crashes down. And when your blood sugar crashes down, you become fatigued. For those people that have diabetes, you know this. People with diabetes really know when their blood sugar is crashing. They can feel it, and one of the first things they feel is fatigue, sometimes anger, sometimes weakness. For those of us that don't have diabetes, we may not recognize this as much. But how many of you have ever felt kind of really low on energy, fatigued, and then eaten something and felt better? Yeah, I see in the room that lots and lots of hands go up. Well, the reason for that is because you were low in blood sugar. And so that's where nutrition comes in. And one of the best things that people can do for fatigue is to eat healthfully. And what does that mean? It means different things to different people. But it means eating at fairly regular time intervals. And for some people, that might be every 2 hours, and for other people, it may be every 6 hours. But somehow, fairly regularly. And that when you eat kind of a mixture of foods. And hopefully a mixture of foods that have some protein in them. I don't care whether it's animal protein or vegetable protein. I'm not going to get into that discussion. And if you're going to eat things with carbohydrates in them, that you eat what we call complex carbohydrates. They take longer to break down. So something like crackers or whole wheat bread are better than a candy bar, which is simple sugar and raises your blood sugar, then it drops fast. And probably all of us get enough fat, but in fact, fat is necessary for us to continue living. And so we do need to get a little bit of fat. So what are good snack foods? Foods that are fairly complex. Depending on whether you're looking at weight or not, but something like peanut butter. If you're really, really fatigued and think your blood sugar is low, juice, because it's a fast lift. But then once you've had this fast lift, you want to eat something else because you don't want to crash again. So healthy eating is important for fatigue, and people don't think about that very often. Another thing that's really important for fatigue is exercise. And that may sound really strange. How can I exercise when I'm so fatigued? Well, to understand that a little bit, you need to understand, and I'm going to grab some water, or I'm going to sit here and cough, and I can tell you that I'm COVID negative because I had a COVID test an hour ago. I can't get back in my country without one. One of the prime symptoms of depression is fatigue. Same thing, by the way, of stress and anxiety. And so when people feel fatigued, very often mood is important. People who are interested in mood ends up being really, really important. And one of the ways to change mood, one of the very best ways of changing mood, is exercise. So, what I suggest is the next time you're fatigued, try taking a short walk. It doesn't have to be very long, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And you're going to find out something. When you're finished, you're either going to feel worse, in which case you don't have to do that again, or you're going to feel better, in which case you have a new tool. Because the thing you don't think about doing when you're fatigued is any sort of exercise. And I'm not suggesting running a marathon, as I know a few of you here do. And I'm not suggesting, 20 minutes of weightlifting. Just a gentle walk is enough. Get outside. I'd say get outside and get in the sun, but I think that I did not bring any sun to Victoria. Hopefully you'll get it soon. But even in the rain, exercise is a really good tool for dealing with fatigue, even though it's a little bit counterintuitive. So exercise, food. Check your medications. And when I say check your medications, I don't know quite how it works here in Canada. Does your doctor go over all your medications with you, or you take it to a pharmacy? Either. Okay, I always tell folks in the States to go to their pharmacist, because their pharmacist usually has more time. And what you do is you just put everything that you're taking into your bag, into a brown bag, take it to the pharmacist and say, could you just kind of go over these for me and see? Because sometimes medications can cause fatigue. Sometimes you just have to live with that. The medication's more important than the fatigue. But a lot of times medications can be changed, and that can help. So it's worth getting a medication check. And by the way, when you take those medications into your pharmacist or your physician, take with you everything, all your vitamins, any alternative medicines. If you're using marijuana, talk about it. Because all of those, anything that you put in your mouth or in your body has a side effect. If I eat a piece of cake, it has a side effect. Okay, it makes your hips wider. Everything you put in your body has a side effect. And that's true of all of these natural, homeopathic, et cetera, things. And sometimes those things can interact in very strange and not so good ways. So that's another way of dealing with this lack of energy, is checking out the medication piece. Then, let's say you're still really fatigued. Social interaction is really helpful. How many of you have been more fatigued during COVID than you remember being before COVID? At least some of you, a lot of you here. Okay, and that's because we all lacked so much social interaction. We all lack structure in our lives. And lack of structure, lack of social interaction can cause fatigue as well, or cause lack of energy. And then when you lack energy, you do less, and then you do less, and then you do less, and it gets to be a really vicious cycle. So all of those things are things that you can try when you're dealing with fatigue. The most important thing is to experiment. All of these are things that are self-experiments. And you're not going to hurt yourself, and you may end up with some tools that are very helpful to you. Let me stop for just a minute and see what kind of questions there are for fatigue. For those of you online, you can put questions, I think, in the questions section. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so here, those of you in this room, what sort of questions do you have?
You didn't mention sleep yet.
Oh, I didn't mention sleep. Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, this free-form stuff I sometimes forget, so thank you for reminding me.
I think it would be in there.
Yeah, it would. It's absolutely in there. It's absolutely in there, and I forgot it. Thank you. Okay, so sleep. Having decent quality sleep. How do you get decent quality sleep? Number one, you go to bed at the same time and you get up at the same time every day. And that's hard for some folks. But regular schedule, you don't nap. Or if you do nap, you don't nap for more than about a half an hour. Simple, not simple or not so simple things. Most of us know to kind of avoid caffeine for probably 4 hours or so before bedtime. But the other thing to avoid before sleeping is alcohol. Alcohol actually disturbs sleep. It may help you get to sleep faster, but the quality of sleep you have is much worse. And so if sleep is a major problem, avoid alcohol or limit alcohol for the few hours before you're going to sleep. If you have a sleep partner, ask them if you snore loudly or if you sometimes stop breathing when you're sleeping. You won't know that, but they will. If that happens, you may have sleep apnea, and that's a medical condition that really disturbs sleep, and it may mean that you need some treatment, and it's worth talking to your physician about. If you have problems getting to sleep at night or getting back to sleep, how many of you wake up with what I call the 3 a.m. horrors? Everything that could possibly go wrong will. You know, I will forget about sleep tomorrow when I give this lecture at UVic, and they'll all hate me. And besides that, I'm going to have a positive COVID test, and I'm going to have to stay here for 10 days. And then, you've had those sorts of, yeah. Okay. If you wake up at 3 a.m., or if you have trouble getting to sleep, our minds are a little bit like a radio. And remember, in a radio, you can only get one station clearly at a time. You can get lots of stations, but only one clearly at a time. Our minds are the same way. And if you can quiet the static, you can probably get back to sleep. The way to quiet the static is to keep your mind engaged. And everybody does this differently. You can count backwards from 100 by threes. You can name every province and every provincial province and every town you can think of in every province in Canada. You can try to name every state in the United States. You can, if you travel a lot, every place that you've ever visited and one site from that place. The name of a girl, or the name of a boy, or the name of a bird, or a name of a rock in alphabetical order. A is for Albert, B is for Bill, C is for Charles, etc. Any of those sorts of mind games that keep your mind occupied. Don't try counting sheep, because it doesn't keep your brain engaged enough. You'll get to sheep number 7, and all of a sudden you'll be thinking about the 4 a.m. horrors again. You need to keep your brain engaged. But it works pretty well, and it's easy. The other thing to do is if you're laying around in bed for more than about 15 or 20 minutes and can't get back up to sleep, get up, go in another room, read something that is not terribly interesting, and then go back to, for 15, 20 minutes and then go back to bed. Very often, that's another way of breaking those cycles. So those are all hints of ways to kind of get better sleep. There are now some very nice, for real sleep problems, besides kind of the physical problem, physical way of using a CPAP, a machine that helps you breathe, there are some, probably the best treatment is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's also one of the better treatments for pain. And online, there are some good cognitive behavioral therapy treatments for sleep. I can't recommend any, but ask around about them because there are now a few programs that are pretty good. What?
30 minutes.
Say it out loud.
Ding, ding, 30 minutes.
Oh, 30
I'm a
minutes.
timekeeper.
Duh. He's my clock.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are some things about sleep. What else do you want to know about fatigue or not having enough energy? Yes?
Brain fog. Is that fatigue?
I'm sorry, what?
Brain fog.
Brain fog?
So tired.
Brain fog? Brain fog usually, if you're really, really fatigued, you can get brain fog, but brain fog usually is something that comes with certain illnesses. Chemotherapy causes brain fog. COVID can cause brain fog. And brain fog can be fairly long-lasting. And the way of dealing with brain fog, we're not really good with this. I'll tell you that the science on brain fog is not great. But probably the best advice we can give people now is to try to keep the mind active in doing something. Physicians will often say, try doing crossword puzzles, or do Wordle, although you can only do Wordle once a day. I had in one of our classes that we had a long time ago, every week a woman made an action plan for learning 2 new words of Athabascan. And I thought that was a really strange thing for her to be doing. And after the class was over, I asked her about it. Well, she said, I have cancer, I have brain fog, my doctor told me I should learn things or try to keep my brain busy. I've always wanted to learn my native language, which is Athabascan. So her action plan, what she was doing, was right on track, even though it wasn't anything that I would have ever thought of. So any of those sorts of things, and just do a little bit. Walking, the same stuff you do in general for low energy is probably the best you can do for brain fog. The good thing is that it may take a while, but almost always in almost all people it clears. It's not a permanent state.
What about dehydration and brain fog?
Yeah, you can get dehydrated. You all don't live in too hot a climate. But one of the things that happens with older people is they don't want to pee too much. And as we get older, we all end up peeing more. And so what we do is we drink less, and so there's more chance of dehydration. You do not have to drink every minute of every day. There's nothing magic about 8 glasses of fluid a day, even though we all think there is. And it kind of just depends, but if you're not drinking much, there's a real easy way to know whether you're dehydrated. It's real easy. If your pee looks like straw and is clear, pretty much in color, light yellowish in color, you're not dehydrated. If your pee starts getting orangish or brownish, you probably could use some more water. So that's a nice self-test at home. But yes, drinking is important. Yes?
It's a question from our online audience. This is going back to fatigue. How do you differentiate fatigue with depression?
fatigue is a symptom of depression. Fatigue can be a symptom of a lot of other things too, so I don't want people to think that everybody that is fatigued is depressed. But fatigue is one of the key symptoms of depression. And that's why I say doing things, being socially active, walking, is kind of a good way of doing that. And by the way, if you've kind of done all these self-management things that I've talked about, and you've kind of gone through the list, and you're still really fatigued, please talk to your healthcare provider. Because not all fatigue can be taken care of. I mean, if you have anemia, that's not something that self-management is going to take care of. If you have certain illnesses, that's something that self-management is not going to take care of.
What's wonking?
What?
Wonking?
Wonking?
I thought you said wonking.
Walking. Sorry. You know, it's a strange American accent. Walking. No. That's what I mean. All right, so do we have, you have more?
And another one, just going back to sleep. What do you recommend for people whose sleep is disrupted due to chronic pain?
For people whose sleep is direct due to chronic pain, number one, they need to talk with their physicians, because it's really important to, especially if they're using pain medication, to manage medication and sleep. And so you know, the timing of medications can help that to somewhat. Very often, getting up and doing something will sometimes break that pain cycle. It may be that being still for too long starts causing cramps, in which case just walking a little bit, and when I say walking, I don't mean going outside, I mean just walking around the room, even massaging a muscle that's cramping. Those are things that can be helpful. And if sleep is really, really disrupted by pain over time, it may be that it's something that you really need to talk with your physician about. But start keeping a diary. One of the things that really helps is if you start understanding your pain. So I went to bed at 10 o'clock and I woke up every night at 12 o'clock with my right leg really hurting. Well, it may be that you need to position your right leg in bed a little bit more. You know, put a pillow under it. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can play with. But until you kind of understand what's going on, you can't do anything about it. So if that happens, start keeping a diary, and the more you can see patterns, the quicker you can help break those patterns. All right, we have talked a long time.
One more quick one.
Okay.
One more quick one on sleep. You were suggesting that you get up if you can't sleep and read a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm very prone to reading in bed. Do you not recommend that?
Yeah, it's better that bed be used for two things: sleep and sex. And because that helps, because otherwise your brain says, oh, we can do everything in bed. We can eat in bed, we can read in bed, and what you gotta do is you gotta train your mind that bed means sleep. So it's better to get up, even if you just get up and sit in a chair at the side of the bed. Okay? All right, can I go on to some other topic? We've already talked a little bit about mood. I'm going to talk a little bit more, and then I think maybe we'll skip to pain. And I think as we talk about mood, I'm going to talk about grief a little bit. One of the things that we know from our research, we've now had about 10,000 people fill out questionnaires in various studies over the years of self-management courses. And one of the things that we almost always look at is their depression level. So one of the questionnaires that people fill out is a depression screen. About a third of the people that come to any of our workshops have clinical depression. And it doesn't matter whether they're in Canada or in New Zealand or in Pennsylvania or in China. About a third of the people are clinically depressed. And that clinical depression, any symptom you have, that depression makes worse. And the reason is that fatigue and pain, depression, anxiety, are all processed in the exact same place in your brain. And so these things feed into each other. It's not as though pain is not real. Pain is very real. If I cut off my finger, cutting off my finger causes the pain, not my brain. But I don't feel that pain until the nerves send the message to my brain. Just like you don't see anything until the retina in your eye sends the message to your brain. And you think about that. Somebody with a torn retina doesn't see. And it's because the message isn't getting through. So, all this stuff gets processed pretty much in the same place in the brain, and so what happens is they all add to each other. If you're depressed, you're going to have more pain, you're probably going to have more fatigue. If you have fatigue, it adds to depression, and you end up having this really vicious cycle. That's the bad news. The good news is that if you can break any one of these things, everything gets better. Everything gets better. And depression, again, exercise, decent eating, socialization, keeping the mind active, those are all things that will help depression. Now, there's also a time and a place for medical intervention or psychological intervention. So if you have been feeling really down and this stuff has been going on for a while, talk to your provider and get a referral. It may be for medication, it may be for a little bit of therapy, but it doesn't take a lot for most people to move that depression. And I say most people, because unfortunately there are a few people in our world that are born with a chemical imbalance, and it is devilishly, devilishly difficult to move that depression. And all the self-management stuff I'm talking about probably, it's not going to hurt them. It might help them a little bit, but it's not the answer. So I want to be very, very clear. So if somebody out there is suffering from ongoing long-term depression, I'm not suggesting that it's a simple thing, because it isn't. Grief is a special kind of depression. And quite frankly, we are in a grieving society right now. We have all lost 2.5 years in one way or another. Many of us have lost individuals that are close to us, or pets that are close to us, or maybe relationships that are close to us. And we're social animals. And as social animals, this grief ends up being compounded. Aboriginal communities, I'm sure in Canada, I know in the United States, I know in Australia, I know in New Zealand, talk about generational grief. And for those of us that are not of those communities, it's sometimes a little hard to understand what generational grief is. But it basically is grief that is passed from generation to generation because of bad things happening. I think maybe the whole world may get a taste of what some of our friends have been telling us about generational grief. I've been doing a lot of thinking about generational grief recently in the light of COVID. And I think I understand it a little bit better. I have always understood it as words, but I've never understood it in my gut. So what do you do about grief? And by the way, this is something that you can do about depression, about anxiety, about stress, but especially about grief, is you can write about it. Just write. Don't worry about spelling, grammar. You can do it in pencil and paper. You can do it on a computer. And it's not for anybody to read. It's just like today, today's a really shitty day. It is raining, and I just learned that my cousin had a heart attack, and I don't feel like doing anything, and my cat's old, and I'm afraid my cat, that's the sort, does that sound familiar? Just write that stuff down. And I'm not sure I can really do this anymore, and I'm tired of smiling at people. Write that down, and write it down like every day, every 2 days, every 3 days. And again, you're going to start seeing a pattern. There's a whole group of research on therapeutic writing. And therapeutic writing is simply, you give people a clue, and a clue is diagnosis or a stop sign. And you have them write anything they want to write for 15 minutes. And then if they want to read it to each other, they can, and if they don't want to read it to each other, they can't. They don't have to. What we find is people that do that end up getting better. Again, it's not a tool that works for everybody, but it's worth a try. And people have found a lot of writing. Now, what's very interesting is that when you lead a therapeutic writing group, as I've done, one of the rules of the group is that everything is fiction. So you can't ask somebody, well, did that really happen? Or, oh, that must have been horrible. No, it's all fiction. But in fact, what people are writing is they're writing snippets and bits of their own life. And some of this writing is absolutely beautiful. It is magnificent. Years ago, when I had cancer, I actually did a series. I was in a therapeutic writing class and wrote a series of essays about communities in Maine, which is where I visit each year in the summer. And these vignettes were really very thinly veiled experiences that I was having with cancer. Mm-hmm. There's a whole long series about lobster and lobstering and the complications of lobstering, and it really had to do with chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't know that at the time I was writing it, but as I look back on it now, I can see how those experiences are related. So I give you that as a tool for dealing with depression, and I'm not even sure how I got there. Oh, I know, I was talking about grief. Another thing specifically with grief is if you've lost a person and you're grieving that person, write a letter to that person. Write a letter saying all the things you wish you had said, or even all the things that you said, and what they mean to you. And again, you don't need to show it to anybody, but just getting that stuff out tends to be very helpful. And also just to know that grief is a process, and thankfully time usually heals. If somebody's deeply grieving for another individual for more than 6 months or a year, then it's probably time to ask for some help, to maybe become a member of a grief group. That doesn't mean you forget people. Ritual. If your particular religion or spiritual beliefs have ritual around grieving, it can be very, very helpful to partake in that. Mm-hmm. So those are at least some of the things that you can do about grief.
Good. 50 minutes, Kate. Okay.
15 minutes?
50 minutes we've done. We've finished 50 minutes so far.
Oh, we finished 50 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to stop. And I'm going to let you all ask me questions, people in the audience. You can tell me what they've asked. I realize that we have not gotten to all of your topics, but I've tried to at least touch on a lot of them. I'll say one thing about osteoporosis, and that is walking, upper body exercise, because you want to have stuff with your arms, getting enough calcium, and maybe medication. But those are kind of the rules of thumb for osteoporosis. What do you have for questions? And then we'll take one from the audience.
I've gotten this from a couple of people. How do you deal with caregiver burnout when one or two of the people involved has a chronic condition?
Okay, how do you deal with caregiver burnout when?
When one or two of the people involved has a chronic condition.
Okay, so, and somebody else here asked about caregiving too. Let me talk a little bit about caregiving. Nobody ever asks to be a caregiver, but caregiving is almost always an option. In other words, we choose to be caregivers. We could walk away. Yes, you're a husband. Yes, you're a wife. Yes, you're a mother. Yes, you're a father. But people do walk away from caregiving. So number one, congratulations if you stayed in caregiving, because that is a huge move. Caregiving is not easy. Understanding that as a caregiver, you do not always have to be an A+. I cannot tell you how many caregivers I've talked to, and I said, can you get some help? Oh yeah, but I can do it better myself. That's probably true. You probably can do it better yourself. But if you burn out, you can't do it at all, and then you're a failure. And so getting help. And probably the hardest thing that caregivers have to do is to ask for help. So how do you keep from burning out? And that's asking for help. And please don't be like my mother was. My mother would say, well, they should just know. They should, no, I'm not a mind reader. You have to tell me, as a caregiver, your job is to help people understand how they can help you. And what you do is you think about specific tasks. So if somebody says, oh, is there anything I can do to help you? Yes, could you bring me dinner once a month? When I had cancer, I said to people, could you take me to the movies once a week or twice a week? You know, this was something my friends could do. I wasn't asking them to do bedside care. I wasn't asking them to do anything terrible. They were relieved, and it was helping me. Could you cut my grass? Yes. I hear a sign back there, a hand.
Well, I'd like the flip side of that, if we could.
Okay.
How we, as the people with the chronic disease, how can we help our partners?
By telling them what you need. It's not, you know, oh, I'm so tired. It's, you know, I'd really like to go to dinner tonight, but I really need to be back home by 8 o'clock. It's when I go and do speaking engagements, fatigue is a major part of my life. Here it's been very easy, but if I go to Italy, or if I go to Spain, they expect me to eat dinner and stay up with them until 11 o'clock at night. They're wonderful hosts. I can't do that and function. So before I'll go to places, I'll say, I will do anything you want from 8 in the morning to 8:30 at night. But I will do nothing between 8:30 at night and 8:30 in the morning. And if you do that and make it very clear what your needs are, as long as their needs are met, it usually works pretty well. But if you don't express your needs, then it becomes a big deal. When I was coming up here, I knew I had to have a COVID test within 24 hours of returning to the United States. So I wrote to Patrick and said, I have to have a COVID test on Wednesday. You know, we can do all the speeches, anything you want, but I have to have a COVID. And he figured it out, and we went off, and I had my COVID test. But if I'd gotten here and told him that this morning, it would have caused a huge kerfuffle.
Oh,
Well, you know, do you understand the difference? So you have to be clear what you want. And sometimes we're not, oh, I really don't want to bother them. Remember that people like giving. When we asked people in our programs what they like best, they said sharing. And when we asked them what sharing meant, they told us helping others. Not being helped, but helping others. So think about it as giving a gift when you ask others to help you. But do it in a reasonable amount. I'd like you to clean my house 5 days a week for 4 hours each time. No. But most of us have enough social contacts. We could organize those around us to help us if we were just a little more out front with what we really needed. And sometimes we have to remind them, no, I cannot walk that fast. How about my walking in front of you all the time? Because that way you can't race ahead of me. That's the sort of thing that I think helps. Other question? Any? Yes?
How will 2 years of COVID and related post-traumatic stress impact the general population, and specifically those with chronic health conditions? How can we acknowledge this?
You know, I think number one, the question has to do with how do we acknowledge what COVID has done. Number one, I don't think we know what COVID's done. I talked to some graduate students at Stanford last week, and I said, you are the ones that 20 years from now will be able to determine what this has done to society. Those of us that are living through it today, we don't know. And I don't think people with chronic disease are so special in this case. Parents with young children have had a hellish time, a really hellish time. Teachers who have been dealing with parents and their own children and kids in school and Zoom have had a hellish time. Some of us that are older, quite frankly, I think it may have been easier for, because we had a little bit more life experience. Not all of us. Some people it's been really, really difficult. But I don't think we know. And so I think that we have to understand that we're all in this together. And just to be kind to each other, to give each other a little bit of slack, to help those that fall through the cracks. And I think that's the best we can do, because I don't think we know. And I'm not sure in my lifetime we'll know. But for those of you, a few of you are much younger here, you have a whole wonderful new research career finding out. Yes?
Do you find that technology is creating a lot of stress and anxiety among older people, simply because you have to deal with bots all the time. You have to deal with so much of your questions online, and then navigating all that is
Yeah.
difficult.
You know, it's really interesting because we moved a lot of our stuff online very early in COVID. And there was all this consternation. Older people can't deal with this. It'll never work. You know, older people, you know, there's this and that. And quite frankly, we kind of did huge amounts of technical assistance and hand-holding for a few months. And quite frankly, folks learned to do things. I actually have a great deal of more faith in older people than a lot of older people do. And, you know, we learned to deal with the telephone. We learned to deal with crossing the street with cars when there weren't horse and buggies. I mean, we've learned lots of things And I think that older people can learn, yes, it's new. And by the way, I am a technophobe. My staff always tells me I need to put on a mask when I turn on my computer so it won't recognize me. So I tell you this not as somebody that's terribly technologically advanced. Anybody that knows me knows that that's not the case. But I also know that I'm capable of learning. And I think most older people are. Now, you know, if there's a lot of cognitive impairment, that's another situation. But I think it's a temporary, not a permanent situation. It's just kind of the next, you know, do I know how to tweet? Yeah, I kind of actually do know how to tweet. Do I want to tweet? No. And have I ever turned on TikTok? No. But am I capable of it? Sure. Do I have to be much more careful online with scams? Absolutely. Can I be taught to look for what to look for? Sure. So does that make any sense? Yeah.
I'm wondering how, what you were saying that we are with health providers in terms of self-management. I agree with you with what you said very much about exercise and hydration, nutrition, and sleep, and all those things to help any chronic condition. But one of my own experiences in my family is that doctors still very much jump to medication and don't
Okay.
talk about some of the
Okay.
self-management things we can do.
I want you to think about the life of a provider. A provider will see 20 patients a day. So 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, it's 10 patients. That's 10, 12, 15 minutes a patient, maybe if you're really lucky, 20. I mean, that's their lives. They don't control that life. They don't have any more time. That's what they have. And one of the things I did recently is I actually sat in appointments with doctors and watched what goes on. Number one, they have to get the person to tell a story in less than 10 minutes. And patients tend to go on and on and on and on about stories. Then they have to try to figure out what's wrong by asking key questions and not getting a lot more story out of it. Then, given the story and the questions they've asked and any lab tests they might have, they have to go through 50,000 different things that could be going on in pattern recognitions and say, I think it may be this, and then in their minds go through 10 or 12 different regimes that the person could possibly benefit from and choose something that is tailored to that individual. And all that happens in 12 to 15 minutes. That's and these folks, if you think you're stressed, trust me, the burnout, especially since COVID, in our healthcare providers is immense. They don't have time to do this. And the reason they don't do it, quite frankly, is because of time. They just don't have the time. That's why for those of you that are doing self-management courses, that are teaching self-management, it takes 14 hours to learn basic self-management. And that's not something that providers, at least most providers, are able to do. So I'm really convinced, I think providers are doing the best they can do. And yeah, there's some things I'd like them to do better. But it's not quite what their dance is. It's not what, their routine is. And so I think that part of our job is to build some of this structure outside of or around the healthcare system. We don't expect anymore for our physicians to go to a medicine closet and compound medications and hand you pills. And why? Because it was more time, and so we have another profession called pharmacy that does that, and they do it better. Yeah.
I completely agree, and it's not that I particularly think physicians should be doing this to sort of support self-management.
I would love them to support self-management more, and quite frankly, many of them do. In all my time in this field, I can probably only name 1 or 2 physicians that have ever been negative. Most of them are incredibly positive. It's just that they don't quite know how to do this given the structure that they have to work in.
I think it's more the conversation, I don't think they need to do it, it's more getting them to not, like, to advise for other options.
Yeah. But again, it's time. The second I advise, and look, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. But the second they say, I'd really like you to take a self-management course. Well, where should I do that? What's it like? And you've taken 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a third of their visit. That's the problem. And that's why we have to build the structure. That's why we have to build it into electronic medical records. That's why we have to get receptionists to tell every patient that comes into the office to do this. I would love for providers to do it. It's not going to happen. Let me get you, and then we'll quit. Yes?
At the very beginning, I forgot your name in the center. You were the go-to person to define self-management. We're talking about something self-management program. We've talked about a number of things that we can do for ourselves. But in listening to your advice, I believe you're talking about a stream of self-medical practice kind of thing. What is self-management?
Okay. Self-management is everything you do between visits to a physician. You cannot not self-manage. You can sit there and do nothing. You can do things that are detrimental, or you can do things that are positive, but you have to self-manage. So it's the 99% of the time you're not in direct medical care, and what you do to deal with your conditions during that time. That's what self-management is. For me, my job is to help you use that time so that you can have the best quality of life, the fewer symptoms that allow you to do the things you want and need to do. That's what, for me, is self-management. Mm-hmm. And it's different for every individual, because it depends on their conditions and their society and their culture. But I can give you general hints like I've given today. Hopefully, I've thrown out enough tools today that most of you will go home with maybe one thing that you might try that you hadn't thought of before. And that's the best I can do in an hour. Okay, we had one more question and then we'll quit.
We actually have till 2:30 if you're up for it.
Patrick, it's up to you.
Okay, well, we have to rush into our vehicle and drive through the traffic and get to the ferry, to
There
get
we
over
go.
to the airport, to get again. So why don't we compromise? How about to 2:15?
Sure, yeah.
Is that
that's
okay? Okay, thanks.
great. All right.
He just made our needs known.
Yes.
Okay.
How can we manage other people questioning the legitimacy of our conditions? So family, work, friends, all questioning the legitimacy of that condition.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. That's a really tough one. And especially when it's conditions that cannot be easily seen. And one of the best ways of doing that is using I messages. Instead of saying, you just don't understand what it's like to be in pain, saying, today I have a really bad headache and the lights are bothering me. Please turn off the lights. So it's getting away from the blaming and just reporting on what is. It's also understanding that it's hellishly hard sometimes to live with somebody with a chronic condition. And sometimes it's important to discuss shared needs. I know you want to go to lunch, I don't feel like going to lunch, or I know you want to have sex. That's even a better one. I know you really want to have sex. Yeah, but I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you. Well, I'm just really not up to having sex right now, but I'd really like you to hold me and cuddle me. Oh, I was afraid that you just didn't want to have anything to do with me. Sometimes having discussions like that can be very helpful. Because you never want to do anything. Well, let's talk about what we can do together. Because remember, the chronic disease is depriving them of companionship and the person that they wanted to be with. So, it's that sort of thing. Communication. Communication can go a long ways. And by the way, if people aren't able to do that themselves, sometimes couples counseling can be helpful. But if you do that, be sure you have couples counseling with somebody that knows something about chronic illness. Check it out. Okay. More questions? You have more? Okay.
Could you speak about the role of fear in experiencing and managing ill health?
Sure. Fear in managing ill health. One of the things that happens when we have ill health is the future becomes uncertain. Now, the future's uncertain for everybody. The minute you're born, the future's uncertain. But kids, most people in life don't go through life. They kind of go through life assuming that life is infinite. They know that's not true. But that's the way they act. When you have a chronic disease, that instantly changes. The future becomes very truncated. It becomes very changed. And the fear is it's going to get worse. I'm going to die. You know, I won't get to see my children graduate. Who knows what the fear is? If you have diseases such as cancer, the biggest fear of people with cancer is fear of the future. And the biggest fear of people with cancer is an uncertainty or fear of the future. And again, some of the ways you deal with that fear is writing it down, expressing it. The more people can express that stuff, and some of it's not even realistic. I don't know how many of you have ever had to have surgery or a medical procedure, and beforehand you thought, oh, of all the awful things that could happen and how terrible it was going to be, and then you actually had the thing, and it really was nothing like that at all. It was fine. You know, it was maybe uncomfortable, but it was not anywhere near as bad as you thought it was going to be. That's a pretty common experience. And I know now when I talk to people that are going to have surgery or whatever, I just say, you know, in my experience, the week or two before surgery is much worse than anything that happens afterwards. Or with somebody that's newly diagnosed with cancer, you are suffering right now the hardest part of your disease, because the future has been changed very rapidly. A lot of chronic diseases creep up on you much more, such as arthritis. And again, if any time emotions become debilitating, long term, then it's time to get some help. Sometimes a little antidepressant can go a really long way. And what's the self-management part of that? Saying, I'm really miserable and I don't think I need to be this miserable. Is there anything you can do to help me with this? But if you never say that, you're never going to get the help, even if the help is medication. Not everything can be done with self-management.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, first of all,
Yeah.
you hear that? Thank you very much for coming out. As Kate was saying, it's really nice seeing people. You know, the last 2 years when you don't see people,
Yes,
do
thank
they
you.
exist anymore? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kate. Kate's been a friend of people in British Columbia for about 30 years.
Yeah.
For 30 years since we started working together. In the big cities, in the tiny little communities way up on top of the province, doing very fun work, yeah. And thank you for coming here and doing 3 talks, all 3 different kinds of talks. You know, one for the faculty, and one for the researchers, and one for us here, in all different topics. And we hope you really good luck in the future. Is there a little something here? Yeah. And at the same time, Barbara, I think I've known you for 15 years now.
It's quite a while.
Okay, thank you for, see, people stick around, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much for being so able to explain self-management and help with other ways. So, Kate, you'll be traveling soon, I think?
I hope so.
You're going to Budapest, Germany?
I'm going to
somewhere?
Budapest in Germany
Okay.
next week.
Okay, so here's something, and there's something in the bag that when you go back to Stanford, when you go back to your office, Self-Management Resource Center, share this with the people that you work with, because we're always working with those people too, and say the people in British Columbia really appreciate the good work they're doing.
Oh, well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
And Barbara, thank you very much for coming to the rescue and helping me keep a straight line and being able to explain things so well. You're really
Always a pleasure,
inspirational.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
And thank you all for coming out today and doing all the things that you do, and keep on keeping on.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Great.